On today's show, we are going to go team by team through each franchise's draft, discussing Silva's grades, what the teams told us, fantasy implications, and more.
I know that people criticize draft grades. Oh, it's meaningless, but everyone has player takes, right? And they're fun to discuss, but there are a lot of angles that you can take when breaking down a team's draft.
The Arizona Cardinals, who of course had the number 4 overall pick, there were plenty of rumors that they could trade out of that spot, decide to stand pat and take Marvin Harrison Jr. Evan ended up with a B, which is pretty good for Evan, actually. You guys know Evan. He's a very tough grader. A B is a pretty good grade for the Cardinals here. Evan, what do you think of their draft?
Yeah, speaking of grades, I saw that some other website gave out 12 A grades. So 12 out of 32. That's more than 33% of the league got A grades. I think I gave out 3 or 4. So B is definitely a good grade. First of all, the Cardinals need a lot of help. So they came out of this thing with 12 picks. I really like that. This is Monty Ossenfort's second draft. And I think his process, second draft as Cardinals GM, and I think that his process in both of his drafts has been really impressive. Obviously, Marvin Harrison, that's a no-brainer pick at number 4. Darius Robinson, the defensive lineman out of Mizzou, a little bit of like an end tackle tweener and a little older. That was the one pick that I didn't really like. But Max Melton, Nick Saban called Max Melton his favorite, and Nick Saban is like a longtime defensive backs coach. Max Melton, his favorite sleeper in the entire draft. So that's how they started. And then we get to Trey Benson at number 66 overall. I think that he will become an upgrade on James Conner sooner rather than later.
Trey Benson was Mike Renner's number 1 running back in this draft. You can go back and listen for more on that in the running back episode with Renner. James Conner is entering his age 29 season, has missed a handful of games in each of the last 4 years, always seems banged up. So I actually really like this landing spot for Trey Benson. We're going to talk more about rookie landing spots in future episodes, but I really like this one for Trey Benson. Other thought that I had was just Kyler, man. I mean, I'm glad they stuck with 4 and took Marvin Harrison for Kyler. He now has Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, Greg Dortch. Like, it's not great, but you add in Kyler's rushing ability. We're up to QB9 on Kyler right now in our initial best ball rankings, just ahead of Jordan Love, but behind Joe Burrow. I also know a lot of people like this Tip Riemann kid out of Illinois, the tight end, but it looks like he's going to be blocked by Trey McBride, so not the best landing spot for him.
Yeah, I do think he's like the perfect kind of complement to Trey McBride on the field from a real life football standpoint, because he melts face masks as a blocker. Trey Benson, 216 pounds, ran 4.39, averaged over 6 yards per carry in college, over 11 yards per reception, home run hitter. One last thing, Marvin Harrison. So Kyler Murray, he has some issues throwing over the middle. I mean, it's hard for him to see over the offensive line. A lot of shorter quarterbacks have that issue, but he is awesome throwing to the perimeter. You think about that one big season that DeAndre Hopkins had in Arizona. Marvin Harrison is a great tactical fit with Kyler Murray.
All right, let's go to the Atlanta Falcons. We talked about this a ton on the last episode we did Friday. Hopefully you guys all listened to that, but the Falcons got an F, a failing grade from Professor Silva here after they took Michael Penix at 8 overall, despite signing Kirk Cousins to $100 million guaranteed. The other one that raised eyebrows, at least for me, and I don't know anything about defensive tackles or whatever, but everybody had Jerzon Newton ahead of Ruke Ahoro. And of course, the Falcons at 35 overall take Ahoro. The very next pick, Washington takes Newton. So it feels like most of the league preferred Newton to Ahoro. But yeah, F from Silva. Go ahead, Evan.
It was a draft that wound up being centered around a multi-year backup quarterback in Michael Penix and a bunch of non-premium positions. So, I mean, I don't think you can do a whole lot worse than that. Michael Penix is about to turn 24 years old. He's undergone 2 ACL reconstructions. He struggled in both the national title game and at the Senior Bowl. And at very least, they're going to burn half of his first 4 years because Kirk Cousins, they can't get out of that contract for at least 2 years. So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the beneficiary behind him was the Bears, who we will get to.
Mm-hmm.
but that was a huge beneficiary. And then Ohoroho, Rook Ohoroho.
Oh
Oh
man, I
God.
really butchered. They're going to be all over me. I really
Yeah,
butchered
yeah.
that one.
Um, the Falcons traded up for him, and they gave up too much to move up 8 spots to go draft Ohoroho over Johnny Newton.
Yeah.
And Ohoroho had 12 career sacks as a 5-year player in college. Brandon Dorless is another end tackle tweener. I mean, I would be really pissed if I was Kirk Cousins. And I mean, there are rumors that Cousins camp and his agent are like, what in the heck did the
Yeah.
Falcons do here? Because the whole point is to build, maximize your draft picks. They came out with a multi-year backup quarterback and a bunch of non-premium positions.
Not a rumor that Cousins Camp is pissed. I mean, the agent put his name on it. He was like, that we expected to get somebody that can help us win right now. And I actually do think the Falcons are the best team in the NFC South, in spite of what they continue to kind of trip over their own feet here. Last 4 years, they've had four top 10 picks. Kyle Pitts, of course, didn't use that much last year. Johnny Smith almost had as many catches. Drake London, haven't used him enough. Bijan Robinson, didn't use him enough. And now Michael Penix, another top 10 pick, who they definitely won't use. So just an absolute mess for the Falcons here. I get what they're saying, that if they have it, they're not going to be drafting this high again. If they have a chance to draft a quarterback, they think is a franchise guy, they have to close their eyes and just do it. It just does not make a lot of sense. And you're overconfident in your evaluation of Michael Penix. That's, people get all tripped up all the time. To me, you want more darts at the board, not assuming that you can pick the right dart. We'll see on Michael Penix, or maybe we won't see for a couple of years. Panthers got an F also from Silva here. Traded into the first round to take Xavier Legette. Second pick was 46 overall on Jonathan Brooks, the running back, of course, coming off an ACL. Another F here, Professor Evan. Go ahead on the Panthers.
So if you were a fan of the Bucs or the Saints and you weren't super thrilled with their draft, just know that the other two teams in the NFC South division absolutely blew it. And the Panthers, they were already, shooting from a position of weakness because they're paying taxes on last year's trade for Bryce Young, and also the signing of Miles Sanders. I mean, they draft a running back who, look, Jonathan Brooks, I think has a chance to be really good in the NFL, but he is still a running back at a non-premium position coming off a late season torn ACL. They traded up for Xavier Legette, who, I mean, shaky evaluation, profile similarly actually to Jonathan Mingo, who did not have a good rookie season. I guess the Panthers have a type, not a very good type. Jatavian Sanders, he's got some potential as a seam stretching tight end, but not going, probably going to be a part-time player because he's not a blocker and he does not run after the catch. Those are some glaring red flags. There's a reason that he dropped to the top of the 4th round, but just did not come away impressed whatsoever with the Falcons or the Panthers drafts. Both got Fs.
Yeah, the Legette thing, I understand when people start saying, "Oh, he's the next Debo," and I heard the Jonathan Mingo comp also. When people say he's the next Debo, that scares me, man, because there is only one Debo, and he is a massive outlier, and that scares me when people start comping guys to Debo. The Jonathan Brooks thing is funny, especially in the context of how much money they paid Miles Sanders last year. Now, they say they love Miles still. I know Dave Canales is new here. Miles lost his job to Chuba Hubbard last year after they paid him $25 million. Then they use a round 2 pick on Jonathan Brooks. I could see someone like the Cowboys calling the Panthers and be like, hey, we'll give you something for Miles Sanders, but you're going to have to eat a bunch of that cap hit. It's $7.7 million, 5th most among running backs here. So we'll see on Miles Sanders, but maybe they have plans to move on from him, even though they're denying it right now.
I do think that the Panthers deserve a little bit of credit for getting Deontay Johnson at a very, very, very low cost. So maybe I should have given him a D-.
Yeah, I mean, I see what they're trying to do. They're trying to get Bryce Young more weapons. They invested a ton in the offensive line in free agency. In the draft, they get the wide receiver, the running back, the tight end. They add Deontay Johnson. They're trying to get him more weapons around him. It's just shaky.
Yeah, look, if Dave Canales can, resurrect the career of Bryce Young, everything's going to look a lot better. So,
yep.
But I don't think that they maximize their picks here.
All right, let's go to a team that Evan gave a very good grade to, B+, the Chicago Bears. Of course, everyone knew they were taking Caleb Williams. They sit tight at 9 and have a gift, in my opinion, fall into their lap in Rome Odunze. I am calling this, Evan, the greatest pass-catching core ever for a number 1 overall pick. DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. Very, very exciting for Caleb. What do you think of the Bears draft?
Yeah. And they also get credit for this year's number 40 overall pick. That's Montez Sweat, who made a huge difference for their defense. They had a top 10 defense down the stretch last year after his acquisition. And Keenan Allen, they got him for pick number 110 overall, and he's going to be a rookie quarterback's best friend, I think. So you're starting there. You take, a Heisman Trophy winning quarterback who really was a Heisman Trophy contender for all 3 seasons in his college career. I mean, I think Caleb Williams is a baller. You benefit from the Michael Penix pick. Take Rome Odunze. That's a best case scenario, I think, for the Bears. And then, I mean, the tackle that they got out of Yale is really interesting at number 75 overall. I think he slipped a little bit. He finished his career. He needed quad surgery and missed his final 6 games in college, but he's an interesting prospect. I dinged him for taking a punter in Torrey Taylor out of Iowa, but man, I'll tell you what, a lot of reps for Torrey Taylor punting at Iowa. So he's not going to come into the league unprepared or raw or inexperienced or anything like that. I mean, he won the MF and Ray Guy Award. And then I don't usually like when teams trade future picks, but in this case, Austin Booker, defensive end from Kansas, fell way too far, and the Bears went up and got him. And I like that pick.
Yeah. Seemed like the Bears were open to trading out of 9, but once Odunze fell to 9, they're like, nah, we have to take Rome Odunze here. And I like that, especially given Keenan Allen is on a 1-year deal. Caleb is going to be a factor in fantasy right away, and we'll obviously be talking about this plenty over the next few months, but our initial ranks have Caleb Williams QB 12 for redraft, right behind guys like Jordan Love, Trevor Lawrence. So, I mean, Caleb Williams is going to be right in the mix for a starting fantasy quarterback right away. Dallas Cowboys are next. They received a C from Evan. I mean, this team had so many holes going into the drafts. Left tackle, center, linebacker, wide receiver, defensive line, running back. Everyone is killing them for not addressing the running back position and signing Zeke here today. We're recording this Monday afternoon. They signed Zeke Elliott this morning back. Everyone's killing them for not signing a running back. I don't know, man. When you have that many holes, how can I kill you for not drafting a running back? But Evan, what do you think of Dallas's draft?
Dallas just came into this draft with a lot of needs, and it was just going to be almost impossible for them to fill them all. They did at number 29 overall, Tyler Guyton. He's a little bit on the raw side, but he's got a lot of upside. He's a massive dude. In the second round, I know Dane Brugler loved Marshawn Nealand out of Western Michigan, a small school pass rusher who just above average athleticism. So we'll see on that. They made a trade down to acquire the 73rd overall pick and used that on Cooper Beebe, Kansas State interior offensive line. He might be the answer for them sooner rather than later at center, I believe, after they lost Tyler Biadasz in free agency. Again, just had a lot of needs. We're never going to cover all those bases. I think it was like sort of a meat and potatoes sort of draft. I gave him a C.
Yeah, I mean, look, they made their own bed by not getting out in front of contract extensions. Like you see the Eagles constantly getting out in front of their own players and extensions. It frees up so much cap space, cutting players early. Instead, Cowboys know they have to pay CeeDee, they have to pay Dak, they have to pay Parsons. They can't do anything in free agency. It's just they have so many holes and they're so thin. Now, back to the running back position here for a second. There are guys that could come available. I mentioned Miles Sanders. What about Dameon Pierce, who's fallen out of favor in Houston? What about Jeff Wilson, who's now the running back 4 in Miami? What about Jordan Mason? The 49ers took a running back. Like, there's running backs that maybe Dallas could get for cheap. They just can't afford to pay anyone under the cap, but we'll see there. And obviously, the Zeke Rico thing is interesting. Rico, that all has certainly gotten a vote of confidence from the Cowboys here, but adding Zeke and then probably adding something else at some point. We have a bunch of unlisted work right now in projection still for Dallas.
I like the Damian Pierce idea a lot.
Yeah. Let's go to the Lions. So, of course, Lions offense was very strong last year. People were picking on their secondary, and, that's how we got into these wild Lions games where their offense was so efficient and their defense was struggling. They used each of their first 2 picks at the cornerback position. Evan, you gave them a C+. What about the Lions draft?
Yeah, this offseason has been largely dedicated for the Lions to fixing their secondary, which makes all the sense in the world because they really couldn't cover anyone for the vast majority of last season. They traded for Carlton Davis, and then they traded up to go get Terrion Arnold, who a lot of people thought is the best cornerback in the draft. I get both of those moves. Ennis Rakestraw out of Missouri. A lot of people thought that he had first round talent, but he did not run well. He was in the 4.6s before the draft, so he slips to the end of the second. But again, those are 3 big secondary additions: Carlton Davis, Terrion Arnold, Ennis Rakestraw. Why I dinged the Lions in terms of their draft grade, I gave them a C+, and I like the players that they got, but they wound up trading away their 3rd rounder next year and their 4th rounder next year. And that was in order to get massive project with upside, British Columbia offensive tackle Giovanni Manu, and then a guy who projects as a special teamer. They listed him as a running back and a safety, Sion Vakai.
Mm-hmm.
So I like the players that they got, especially up top, but those trades away are why I dinged their draft grade. And people were like, I would be worried giving them a bad grade based on what happened last year where everybody hated their draft and then they were awesome. I don't care about last year. I'm trying to break down the process through that they used here, and giving up those. And it's supposed to be a much deeper draft next year. So giving up that 3rd rounder and that 4th rounder from next year, I mean, that's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow.
One note I had from a fantasy perspective: good run out for Jameson Williams this offseason. Josh Reynolds is gone. They didn't replace him. They didn't take a wide receiver in the draft at all. I mean, behind Amon-Ra St. Brown, they have Khalif Raymond, Donovan Peoples-Jones. I don't think those guys are real threats to Jameson Williams playing time. We could see Jameson Williams as like a 90% route guy this year, and that's certainly exciting. Let's go to Green Bay Packers. Predictably, I mean, it was a massive favorite that the Packers were going to use their 1st round pick at the offensive line position. They do that, 25th overall with Jordan Morgan. Evan gave them a B-. What about the Packers draft, Evan?
Yeah, the Packers are very focused on relative athletic score, and Jordan Morgan blew it up as he was a 92nd percentile RAS scorer, and I think that they are going to give him a shot to be their left tackle of the future. They made a trade with the Saints. They only moved down 4 spots in the 2nd round, and they picked up 2 picks to do that, number 168 and number 190. I like things like that. And then they still came away with Edgerrin Cooper, who had a lot of 1st round buzz.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of moves that I like to upgrade the draft grade, the draft grade of a team for. You move down 4 spots, you pick up 2 extra picks, and you still get a stud at the number 45 overall selection. He should be a long time star. Edgerrin Cooper is a stud. I really like the pick of Marshawn Lloyd. People were like, oh, they might be redundant with Josh Jacobs. First of all, we love A.J. Dillon as a human being, but as a player, he leaves something to be desired. Marshawn Lloyd, 220 pounds, runs 4.46. A lot of impressive things on his tape. And Josh Jacobs only has a 1-year deal in Green Bay.
I have the same note on Marshawn Lloyd because it stood out to me. Daniel Jeremiah actually had Marshawn Lloyd as number 1 running back in this class, and they were able to get Marshawn Lloyd here at 88th overall. Immediate upgrade to me on A.J. Dillon, right? Like, would not shock me right out of the gate if Marshawn Lloyd wins that backup job and is behind Josh Jacobs there ahead of A.J. Dillon. Let's go to the Rams. Rams got a C+ from Evan. I really thought they were going to use their 1st round pick on offense. I heard from a reliable source that they were actively trying to trade up to get Brock Bowers, but when Brock Bowers surprisingly went 13th overall to the Raiders, that was out the window. So they end up with the 19th overall pick. And Jared Verse, Evan, what'd you think of Rams draft?
I gave him a C plus, and I'll explain why. I mean, Jared Verse, I think, was a steal. I think he fell further than people expected. Number 19 overall, banged out an obvious need for the Rams. That's really, really nice. But then they gave up a second round pick in next year's draft to go up and reunite Braden Fisk, Florida State defensive tackle, with Jared Verse. I don't know if you saw the phone call. I mean, it was an awesome phone call, an awesome moment, reuniting those dudes. Really cool, but it cost them a second round pick next year.
That's expensive, yeah.
Yeah, and Braden Fisk is going to turn 25 early next year. So overaged, defensive tackle, and cost them a bundle. And then they go and draft Blake Corum, who they openly compared to Kyron Williams. That makes it feel kind of redundant. I mean, I like Blake Corum. I had bets on him to be the first running back drafted. He was the third running back drafted. I think he'll be a multi-year quality player in the league, but he's kind of redundant with the running back that they already have as their number one. They definitely cannot use Kyron Williams like they did last year, though, because he's going to break down if they do that.
Well, maybe that's what they're thinking, right? The way they use running backs is they play every snap, they play every down, and until the wheels fall off, and the wheels fall off, then you have someone else that can do that again in Blake Corum. So I actually think that the pick of Blake Corum was interesting from the standpoint of it is going to be very clear the handcuff potential of Blake Corum. If something happens to Kyron, like Blake Corum is going to be an awesome pick, an awesome guy to have, assuming Sean McVay likes him. If Sean McVay likes you and you're a running back, I mean, you're going to be a fantasy star for sure. One other small note I wanted here, no wide receivers until round 6 in Jordan Whittington for the Rams here. Demarcus Robinson, who iced Tutu Atwell down the stretch, appears locked into the wide receiver 3 role. And when you play wide receiver 3 for Sean McVay, you're on the field every single snap. And Demarcus Robinson certainly had some good games for fantasy down the stretch last year.
Yeah, they gave him a 1-year, $5 million deal.
Yep.
He's like a journeyman. That was more money than I was sort of anticipating Demarcus Robinson again. I thought he'd be more like a league minimum player, but they gave him a decent little 1-year deal.
Yeah, he's on the radar for sure. Okay. Vikings got a B- from Evan. Now, they were widely speculated to want to move up and get Drake May or one of the other quarterbacks. It turns out they only had to move up one spot to get JJ McCarthy at 10th overall. And then at 17 overall, Dallas Turner somehow slipped to them. Dallas Turner's stock was kind of falling over the last couple weeks ahead of the draft. Talent certainly appears to still be there. To me, at least, Evan, what'd you think of Vikings draft?
So the Vikings have the ability to drop JJ McCarthy into like the most favorable offensive environment that you can think of outside of like San Francisco. Kevin O'Connell has shown that he's sort of like a quarterback, quarterback kingmaker is what I wrote in the draft grades. He gets to play indoors. Justin Jefferson, TJ Hawkinson eventually will return. They have a good offensive line. He's set up to succeed. I don't care what your opinion of JJ McCarthy is right now. He is set up to succeed. They get him on the rookie contract. Like that's a plus EV move in my opinion. And then going to get Dallas Turner. Now they have their quarterback and their franchise pass rusher now on rookie contracts. The thing is, they had to trade up to get these guys, and they gave up a ton. They gave up their 2024 second round pick, 2 fifth rounders this year, and their second, third, and fourth round selections in next year's draft. It's a lot to give up, man. And I understand it, and I think that they are plus EV draft selections in JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner, but the cost I think was exorbitant, and that's why I gave them a B-. They also came back and drafted a defensive back out of Oregon, Kyrie Jackson, who turns 25 during the upcoming season. So, again, I understand what they did, but the cost was exorbitant.
Did you see their GM took a shot at the spreadsheet socialist? He said something like, "I'm a spreadsheet nerd also, but sometimes you just got to go get your guy," or something along those lines is what he said.
I love that. Maybe Leone could listen and learn a thing or two.
One note I had for fantasy, I mean, they did not add a single running back in this class, not even in the UDFA pool. They didn't add a running back. So Ty Chandler, real solid behind Aaron Jones. I know that they signed Aaron Jones, but I think they still really like Ty Chandler, who was strong down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron Jones is just not a running back that you can use on a full-time basis.
Yeah.
So I think Ty Chandler will have a role. And I mean, I anticipate being higher than market on Ty Chandler.
Let's go to the New Orleans Saints. I mean, everybody knew they were zoned in a tackle. I think it went off at like minus 400 favorite for the Saints to take a tackle with their first pick. They do just that, taking Talise Fuaga 14th overall. Evan gave them a C. What do you think of Saints draft, Evan?
They're another trade up team. So they went up and got Kool-Aid McKinstry, cornerback, pressman cornerback out of Alabama. I love that they can pair him with Marshawn Lattimore. Also, this is probably Marshawn Lattimore's last year with the Saints, but it cost them 2 picks to jump 4 spots. It cost them the number 168 and the number 190 to jump from 41 to 45. So that's a thing that I kind of ding them for. They didn't have any picks between 41 and 150 overall. So they got Fuaga. That was an obvious need, and I think that he's a high floor player, 6'6", 326 pounds. I think he's going to be a stud right tackle for them, and they got a starter at corner. But then they didn't get any likely near-term contributors the rest of the way. I think that Spencer Rattler in the 5th round was worth it, but he's a backup to Derek Carr. I love Bub Means. Pittsburgh wide receiver. I love the name, but 5th round wide receivers rarely work out. And his college production, not a high end college producer.
Let's go to the New York Giants. So this was really interesting. There were a lot of reports out there that the Giants were trying to trade up with the Patriots to 3 for Drake May. They could not get it done. Then at 6 overall, they had Michael Penix available to them. They had JJ McCarthy available to them. They had Bo Nix available to them. Decided to pass on all. Instead, take Malik Neighbors. And I think Malik Neighbors is going to be an awesome pro and an awesome fantasy player. From a Giants perspective, you have Daniel Jones coming off of an ACL. Should be ready for week 1. But if the Giants want to get out from Daniel Jones in 2025, they can for like $22 million in dead money. So they had a chance here to address the quarterback position, decided not to and went Neighbors. Evan, what do you think of that decision? And what do you think of the Giants draft?
Well, you have to include Brian Burns in this draft. They gave him a lot of money, which offsets it a little bit. But he's their 2nd and 5th round pick, and he's one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Malik Neighbors, I think that Brian Daboll, they probably saw a lot of peak Stephon Diggs in Malik Neighbors. I think that Malik Neighbors was the most naturally explosive wide receiver in the entire draft. Loved him at number 6. And then they went hard at the secondary, which is they're rebuilding their secondary. They drafted Tyler Nubin. I believe he was the first safety drafted. They got him out of Minnesota. And then Andrew Phillips is going to play slot corner, I believe, for the Giants. And then in the 4th round, they took a shot on Theo Johnson, who's an absolute freak athlete who, we've talked about the Penn State players not being coached up properly, poor quarterback play. So he didn't put up big numbers in college, but I think that he makes sense as an addition, a complement to Daniel Bellinger, because it looks like Darren Waller is going to retire.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people like Tyrone Tracy as a sleeper in this class. Devin Singletary, not the biggest obstacle. So, round 5, I know typically just write off at other positions, but at running back, my eye is at least on Tyrone Tracy here.
Yeah, the spreadsheet socialists don't like Tyrone Tracy because he's old. He's like 25, but 96 percentile relative athletic score, really good with the ball in his hands, a big time kick returner. I gave the Giants a B because I think that they got 4.5 contributors, or, between 4 and 5 early contributors and 2 really high impact ones probably in Malik Neighbors and Tyler Nubin.
Eagles were active in this draft, man. I think 8 trades they made or something crazy like that. You could make a case that the Eagles had a bottom 3 defense over the final 2 months of last season. They addressed that immediately. 22 overall, Quinyon Mitchell out of Toledo, and 40th overall, Cooper DeJean, the high school basketball hoopster himself, at 40th overall. Evan, you gave them an A- here. What do you think of Eagles draft? And by the way, during draft weekend, they also signed A.J. Brown to that extension.
Yep. So the primary reason that the Eagles defense collapsed, and this was an issue all year, is because they were just slow in the secondary, so slow. Darius Slay's 33. James Bradbury will be turning 31 in August. Bradbury had a really bad year. So it made all the sense in the world. First of all, they got kind of fortunate, I would say, for Quinyon Mitchell to fall to them at number 22. But that's a great situation. And then they go get Cooper DeJean out of Iowa. I think that he dropped out of the first round because most teams saw him as a safety.
Yeah.
But the Eagles are so in need of just talent in the secondary. Like they can go, the coaches can figure that out. You just go get to Cooper DeJean with all that athleticism and college production. And he was a great return man too in college. That was a great situation. Clemson running back Will Shipley had an awesome 2022 season, was hurt a lot in 2023, but a really good pass catcher, maybe probably a talent upgrade on Kenneth Gainwell. And then they came out of this draft, as I mentioned at the top, with an extra third round pick next year and an extra fourth round pick next year. They now have 2 third round picks, a fourth rounder, and 2 fifths in next year's draft. So I love this because Howie Roseman really, immediate had short-term upgrades for sure, immediate help in the secondary, and then he's still building for the future. I mean, that's how you do it.
I know Johnny Wilson has some huge fans out there. He lasted until the 6th round, 185 overall for Johnny Wilson. Just an incredible size-speed combo. I know some people like Renner thought he should move to tight end, but I know Amico loves Johnny Wilson, and it wouldn't shock me if at some point Johnny Wilson has wide receiver 3 routes in him as soon as year 1 here. Not a ton of competition here. They do have Devontae Parker, Paris Campbell behind A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith right now. Let's go to the 49ers. So we talked about the 49ers stuff a bunch on Friday. You can go back and listen to that episode. Again, they took Florida wide receiver Ricky Pearsall at 31 overall as the Debo and Ayuk rumors continue to swirl. Evan gave them a B-. Go ahead on the 49ers, Evan.
Yeah, I gave them a B- because I think that they didn't necessarily extract maximum value from all their picks. And the way that I characterize this draft, it's pretty team specific, which I think that's great. I mean, I like their draft. I gave them a B. I gave him a B-, but it's still a B. And Ricky Pearsall, I thought that he was more of a late second round type player. They took him late in the first. He's a big time athlete. His addition allows them to potentially part with Deebo Samuel. And it just seems like everybody loves him. I mean, he's going to be 24 years old for the duration of his rookie season. So he's not the absolute cleanest of prospects, and he wasn't super, super productive in college, but man, he's an awesome scheme and tactical fit in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Renardo Green, 6 foot 186, sub 4.5, 40, had some great tape against LSU's wide receivers this past year. And then Dominic Puney, I think he actually may end up as their starting center. He played guard at Kansas. And then Malik Mustafa, the safety out of Wake Forest, best tackling safety in the draft. I know you're going to want to talk about Isaac Guerendo.
Yeah, I mean, just a hashtag team preseason guy for sure in Guerendo. Yeah. Only 2 players, and this is from Dane Brugler, only 2 players in the last 20 years have weighed 220 pounds plus and run a 4.33 or better. DK Metcalf and Isaac Guerendo. That's it. I mean, this dude is a total freak, and it would not shock me if he's better in the NFL once he's coached up in the Shanahan scheme than he was in college. It's certainly scary that in college, he was playing behind total dust balls at Louisville and Wisconsin. So yeah, still excited about him, but and want to see how it goes. But it would not surprise me if Guerrero ends up having an impact in this scheme.
Number one speed score running back in the draft.
Yeah, insane. Seattle Seahawks had, for me at least, a boring draft because they didn't really take any skill players. Evan gave them a B minus. What do you think of Seahawks draft, Evan?
They address needs for sure. I mean, and I think that Byron Murphy came at a really good value. I thought that he had a real good shot to be a top 10 pick, but that Penix selection messed a lot of things up from a draft slot projection standpoint. He falls to number 16. They get a great value there. They needed help big time on the interior defensive line, and they also needed help big time on the interior offensive line. And they addressed that with Christian Haynes. I thought that Christian Haynes actually had a chance to be a late first round pick. He goes at number 81 overall. I know that we had on Jordan Reed before the draft, and Jordan Reed, Christian Haynes was one of Jordan Reed's favorite players in the draft. To get him at number 81, I think that he could be a year one starter. Christian Haynes out of UConn.
Yeah, I mean, the Seahawks are so deep at the skill players. I mean, they go 2 deep at running back, 3 deep with good players at wide receiver. Tight end is fine with Noah Fant. Like, not surprised they didn't go with any skill here, really. Let's go to the Bucks. So Bucks got a B minus from Evan, 26th overall. They had Graham Barton slide to them, and to me, that was one of the bigger surprises from at least the offensive line. I thought Graham Barton was for sure going to go in the top 20 here. He slides all the way to the Bucks at 26. Evan, what did you think of Tampa's draft?
Yeah, I thought it was real solid. I thought it was the best in the NFC North. The other teams kind of struggled a little bit. The Saints were okay. But yeah, Jerry Dulac, who has consistently predicted the Steelers' first round pick, had them taking Graham Barton at number 20 overall. They did not do that, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that Graham Barton came at really, really good value. He had an unbelievable pro day, big time athlete, can play all 5 positions on the offensive line. I think that he will settle in at either center or left guard. They got Chris Braswell, Alabama pass rusher, in the second round, 6'3", 251 with 4.6 flat speed. He had 8 sacks last year in the SEC. And then in the third round, another SEC pick, Tyke Smith, safety slot corner hybrid. Jalen McMillan, God, Washington was so loaded on offense. They had 2 early picks. Both their offensive tackles were early round picks. And they had 3 wide receivers drafted within the first 3 rounds. Michael Penix's supporting cast was so loaded at Washington. I think that Jalen McMillan will play slot receiver in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, and Mike Evans is going to be 31 in August, and Chris Godwin's contract is up after the 2025 season. So not the worst landing spot for Jalen McMillan. We'll talk more about that on the ranking landing spots episode.
We should mention that Bucky Irving out of Oregon was a really good inside the tackles runner in college, and that is not Rachaad White's strength. So I think that Bucky Irving, he went at pick 125 overall, 4th round, has a real shot to be the complement to Rachaad White.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that Rachaad White was so valuable last year is that he didn't have a complement, right? I mean, they just had him out there for every single snap. So we're going to continue to look at the splits that we have for Tampa's backfield. Last NFC team is the Washington Commanders, who, Schefter came on this show and got it wrong with Adonai Mitchell, but he was spot on that the Commanders were zeroed in on Jaden Daniels very early in the process. He also came out today and said that not only was the pick Jaden Daniels, but it was never going to be Drake May. They were deciding between J.J. McCarthy and Jaden Daniels. The Commanders did not think that Drake May was in that tier. So Evan ended up with an A- on the Commanders draft here, the first of the Adam Peters era. Evan, go ahead on Commanders.
Yeah, and for a team that had a little bit of a rocky pre-draft process regarding their quarterback, the Jaden Daniels situation, where it seemed like Jaden Daniels maybe didn't want to play for Washington. The agent was out posting weird stuff on Twitter, and I guess they wound up mending fences, and Washington took Jaden Daniels number 2 overall. I think that's but for a team that had to kind of go through that pre-draft process, and a team that has been an organization that has been through so much following the Dan Snyder area, I thought that they knocked this out of the park. Johnny Newton falls to the second round. I thought he had a chance to go number 23 overall to Minnesota, but he falls to number 36. He's the second best interior three technique pass rusher in the draft behind Byron Murphy. He fell because there's a Jones fracture in his foot, but Washington ends up being the beneficiary of that small fault. Mike Sainristil, Michigan slot corner, it is an absolute stud. This is another guy that Nick Saban talked up big time. Nick Saban had awesome draft analysis, by the way. If you can go look at clips of that, I mean, I would search for that on social media. Ben Sinnott, we talked about him potentially being the number 2 tight end drafted in. He did wind up being the number 2 tight end drafted out of Kansas State. Tested really, really well. Really good blocker, and I watched the in-draft phone call between Adam Peters, who was from San Francisco, and Ben Sinnott. And Adam Peters was like, I see a lot of like George Kittle in you. And George Kittle was a guy who didn't have a ton of college production, but had the athleticism, could block, and obviously, has blossomed into one of the best tight ends in the league.
Yeah, I mean, meteoric rise for Ben Sinnott, who I believe had to walk on at Kansas State, ends up being productive and then doing really well in the post-draft process, rises all the way to 53rd overall. Just from a fantasy perspective, to reiterate, so the reason that it's like controversial, or maybe not controversial, but some people think May is a better dynasty pick than Jaden Daniels, is because of bust rate, right? Like Jaden Daniels appears to have a higher bust rate based on his profile versus Drake May. However, if Jaden Daniels hits, to me, he hits in a really unique way because of the way that he can run, and his floor is higher. I mean, we're over the last 3 seasons, 1 at Arizona State, 2 at LSU, 39 games. Jaden Daniels ran for 2,729 yards and 27 touchdowns. I mean, not Lamar as a runner, but getting into that stratosphere. So, yeah, still want to be really high on Jaden Daniels.
One thing more about Sinnott, I watched the call between him and Adam Peters, and they were showing Sinnott. He had 2 babes on each side of him. So I guess the girlfriends put aside their differences, and they were there to support their man, the man, Ben Sinnott.
All right. Baltimore Ravens, you gave them a B, started out with cornerback Nate Wiggins at 30th overall. What'd you think of the Ravens draft?
Yeah, so a lot of people complain that the Ravens always get like good draft grades, and then their drafts turn out to be maybe average or maybe a little bit above average. And I can explain that because I pretty much always give them good draft grades. They tend to draft like bigger school players, and also people that players that people have heard of, and also players that rank high on the consensus big board. They don't do very much trading, and they also dominate the compensatory pick process. So they get multiple 4th rounders, and again, they draft players that people have heard of. Nate Wiggins, big school corner out of Clemson. Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie comparisons. He's lightweight, 6'2", 173, but he ran 4.28. He's got a lot of really good tape. I mean, playmaker on tape. He'd be a day 1 starter opposite Marlon Humphrey with Kyle Hamilton in a slot. That is a really talented cornerback trio. Roger Rosengarten protected the right side for Michael Penix at Washington, allowed 0 sacks as a 2-year starter. There was some buzz that he might go late in the first round. They got him at the end of the second. Adisa Isaac, another big schooler out of Penn State, tore his Achilles in college, but some people thought that he was he was more productive than Chop Robinson at Penn State, and they got him in the 3rd round. Chop Robinson went in the 1st. TJ Tampa, people thought, some people graded him as like a top 40 overall prospect. The Ravens took him at number 130 overall out of Iowa State. Apparently turned off some teams during the pre-draft process because we didn't accept his Senior Bowl invitation. and that turned off some teams. He winds up going in the 4th round as like a fringe first round talent. So, it's hard to not give the Ravens a good draft grade because of all this, theoretical value that they piled up.
Yeah. One fantasy note for me was the only wide receiver they took here was Tez Walker out of North Carolina, 113th overall. They continue to show a ton of faith in Rashad Bateman, and Rashad Bateman has not done a lot on the field, I think, to make them be faithful in him or make us be faithful in him. But man, I mean, they let Odell go. They gave Rashad Bateman the extension through 2026. They're going to start this year with Zay Flowers, Bateman, Aguilar, Tez Walker as their top 4. So certainly an interesting spot here for Rashad Bateman. Let's go to the Buffalo Bills. We talked about this a little bit on the Friday show, but they traded back and they end up with Keon Coleman as their first pick here at 33rd overall. I don't know if you saw Keon Coleman's first press conference. My God, guy seems like a cool dude. Anyways, Evan, what'd you think of Bills draft?
They wound up with a ton of picks. They traded down twice.
Yep.
So they wound up with 7 picks inside the top 163. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 selections on day 3. They're sort of like in a soft rebuild. You're never really rebuilding when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen. But I mean, I think that they definitely felt like their roster needed replenishment. Keon Coleman went 33rd overall because he ran 4.61, but he is a massive ball snatcher, 6'4", 213, basketball background. The Bills are a team that's really big on the in-game data and tracking. And so they may not have cared as much that Keon Coleman ran 4.61. They would probably argue that he plays faster than that. He averaged 12 yards per punt return too. You don't see 6'4", 213-pound dudes returning punts typically. Second round, Cole Bishop, safety / slot corner out of Utah. Greg Cosell in particular loved this player. He should make, safety slot hybrid. He should make an impact early. Micah Hyde is actually still a free agent. So I think that Cole Bishop will play early. Ray Davis is a guy that we're going to talk about probably quite a bit. What will his role look like with James Cook? But, again, a team, I gave him a C because I don't think it was a super flashy draft or anything. I wanted to see them draft multiple wide receivers too. That's something that Brandon Beane has done historically. Double down at certain positions, and I dinged them for not taking multiple receivers.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting that they only took Keon Coleman. I think they started to play well and at least win games more when they went to a very run-heavy approach late last year. They get Ray Davis here to complement James Cook. But yeah, I don't know that Keon Coleman's going to be like a super high volume guy. I still kind of think Dalton Kincaid leads the team in targets, and I need to think about that more, but we're certainly not getting a discount or a bargain on Dalton Kincaid. He's going in the 50s, late 50s, early 60s right now. But yeah, really interesting what the Bills are doing here, kind of remaking the team on the fly. Bengals got a C+ from Evan. I thought they were a candidate to take a round 1 wide receiver. They end up, though, getting Amarius Mims, who fell to them at 18th overall. And I actually really like that. I mean, Joe Burrow just has to stay healthy for this team. I mean, they just don't have a choice. So to get Mims at 18, I thought was solid. Evan gave them a C+. Evan, what'd you think of Bengals draft?
Yeah, C+. I felt like this was a boom-busty draft, which is kind of like the Bengals drafts of old. They took some character risks. They took, an offensive tackle in Amarius Mims who had 8 college starts, obviously looks the part, could be an absolute stud, but 8 college starts, got hurt a lot in college. Chris Jenkins has the lineage. Cullen Jenkins, Chris Sr. was his dad, but he had 4 sacks in 4 years at Michigan. I understand that was not his role to pile up sacks, but still, you want to see more production than that, I think, out of a second-round defensive tackle, a top 50 overall pick. Third round, Jermaine Burton, character risk, first-round talent, but man, his off-field is really, really questionable. Again, that felt like a pick that the old Bengals would have made. They did take Eric All in the 4th round. Anytime you see Iowa tight end, I think it's interesting, especially if he's a good athlete.
Yeah.
The last 5 tight ends out of Iowa to be drafted: Sam Laporta, T.J. Hawkinson, Noah Fant, George Kittle, and C.J. Fedorowicz.
Yeah.
So anytime I see Eric All, I don't care if he caught 4 passes. Anytime I see an Iowa tight end, I don't care how many passes he caught in college. I think that's a little bit intriguing.
I thought the Jermaine Burton landing spot was awesome because he's going to immediately compete for wide receiver 3 snaps if his head's on straight. And I expect T. Higgins gone after this season, after he plays on the franchise tag this season. So yeah, I like the landing spot for Jermaine Burton. No running backs for the Bengals with any of these picks. And they had a ton of picks. No running backs at all. Good news for Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I think both those guys are going to be major factors in fantasy this year. We'll be talking about them plenty.
Yeah, poor Yoshi, Andrei Yosevich.
Yep.
I mean, Jermaine Burton is going to run as long as Jermaine Burton's head is on straight, like he's going to run circles around those. He's a first-round talent.
Browns did not have many picks here, only had a 2nd rounder, a 3rd rounder, and nothing else until round 5. I didn't have many thoughts on their draft. Evan gave them a C-. Go ahead on the Browns, Evan.
Yeah, I mean they addressed the trenches with their 2nd round pick and their 3rd round pick in Michael Hall, who had a super high pass rush efficiency rating as an interior defensive lineman at Ohio State, and he's real young, and he's a 20-year-old third year sophomore. He ran 4.75 at 299 pounds, and again had a super high efficiency interior pass rush rating. I mean, Andrew Berry, I think, is one of the best GMs in the league, and I love that pick at number 54 overall. Zach Zinter, I think, fell because he tore his fibula and his tibia late last season, but he allowed 0 sacks this past season and is considered like a perfect zone blocking interior offensive line. That's obviously what Kevin Stefanski does. Jerry Jeudy is part of, for better or worse, Jerry Jeudy is part of this because they got him for 5th and 6th round picks, and they're still kind of paying the tax on the Deshaun Watson trade, which looks abominable. So C- for the Browns.
No running backs for the Browns here. Obviously, the Nick Chubb rehab is something that we're watching very, very closely. I have no idea yet when I think Nick Chubb's going to be ready, but anytime in the first half of the season, I think would be an achievement for Nick Chubb. And so for them to get no running backs here, I know they have Deontay Foreman, but Jerome Ford is the guy. Like, even when Chubb gets back, Ford can play on pass down. So I do like the run out a little bit here for Jerome Ford. Broncos had the 12th pick. Very few people had a round 1 grade on Bo Nix from what I could tell. It seemed like the Broncos could trade back and still get Bo Nix, but they decided not to risk it. They stand pat at 12th overall and take Bo Nix. Evan ended up with a D+ on the Broncos class here. Evan, how come?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge reach. I mean, who would anybody have been surprised if Bo Nix went in the 2nd round?
No.
I don't think anybody would have been surprised.
His line was like 32.5 minus 110 for most of the process.
He's old. He is a system fit on paper for Sean Payton. So maybe they can make this work, but it was, they didn't have a 2nd round pick. So it's not like they could go up and get, did you see Sean Payton talking about how he hoodwinked the Vikings into trading up for J.J. McCarthy?
I didn't see that.
Great. So then you come away with Bo Nix and nothing in the 2nd round. In the 3rd round, you get a 243-pound pass rusher out of Utah, Jonah Ellis. 4th round, they trade up for Troy Franklin to pair him with Bo Nix, read the shower narrative as you famously coined. But I don't think Troy Franklin is very good. I mean, there's a reason that he fell to the top of the 4th round, struggles against press coverage. He's like 175 pounds. My boy Audric Estime ends up in Denver. Love that, but they've got 3 other running backs there, that are going to play. Javonte Williams, Jaleel McLaughlin, Samaje Perine. They might cut Samaje Perine, but Samaje Perine plays like a specific role too. Yeah. And that's not a role that Audric Estime is going to play. So we'll see, but I mean, I wasn't impressed with this.
You are not giving enough credit to the shower narrative, to be able to get Nix and Franklin together has to give them a little bit boost, but no. You know,
Well, I mean, but like, there's a good chance that neither of them is any good.
exactly. And like the NFL said what they thought about Troy Franklin. I don't have it in front of me what wide receiver number he was off the board, but it was very, very late for Troy Franklin. I know that the analytics bros like Troy Franklin way more than the NFL and the tape bros. That'll be an interesting one to follow for sure. The one thing about the Broncos, like I think they should be tanking, but I was looking at next year's class. There's not really quarterbacks to tank for. I mean, a lot of these guys do not have a great grade on Shedeur Sanders. Right now, Drew Aller is a mess. So, you know, I was in favor of the Broncos tanking for a quarterback, but if there's not one to tank for, then they're still gonna be bad no matter what, you know. So
The quarterback at Georgia, I think, is considered potentially big time.
okay. Texans got a C from Evan. Did not have a first round pick here following the Steph Diggs trade, but they did. I mean, they had Will Anderson last year, which was part of this class, I believe, and then Steph Diggs this year, which is part of this class, also, I believe, Evan. So yeah, go ahead on Texans draft.
Yeah, Steph Diggs is part of this, but we'll see. You know, Stephon Diggs, there's worry that he's in decline. He did cost him a second rounder next year, so I'm not giving him like a big bump or anything for Stephon Diggs, but he is included in the class. They are missing their first rounder because they went up and got Will Anderson, who worked out defensive rookie of the year, but you know, that was a costly trade. Joe Mixon is also a part of this draft. They acquired him for the number 20 or the number 224 overall pick. Pretty much nothing. Kwame Lassiter out of Georgia was considered a first round prospect, but he ran 4.65. So they get him at 42 overall. Blake Fisher, you know, I watched Notre Dame, and Blake Fisher was not very good as Notre Dame's right tackle, and his pass rush like PFF grade, his PFF college grade, poor. So I don't know about that pick, and he's a right tackle only, so it's not like you can move him to a different position. I wasn't, you know, blown away whatsoever by this draft. I did love watching C.J. Stroud and Micah Parsons go back and forth on actually Renner was on that show.
Yeah.
And C.J. Stroud just owned Micah Parsons over and over and over again. C.J. Stroud is a really, really smart dude. He knows like everything about ball.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not just good at playing ball. He knows everything about ball. And I mean, it just goes to show the S2 test or whatever that he flopped on, like that means nothing.
Yeah.
This guy's really smart.
Renner went from hanging out with us to hanging out with CJ Stroud and those guys during the draft. So
right?
Good for him. I thought there was a chance the Texans would take like a pass catching back to pair with Mixon. They did not do that. They clearly don't like Dameon Pierce anymore. We already talked about that in the previous episode. Maybe he could be a trade candidate to the Cowboys. So I thought a reasonable run out for Joe Mixon here, not really getting any real competition. Colts got a B from Evan. Chris Ballard was on fire during this draft. There's a video out there of him like cackling while he says, "We just got the best rusher in the draft at 15th overall." He's like cackling like Monty Burns over money. He's talking about Latu, of course, with the 15th overall pick. And then also Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell. I butchered his name again. I'll just call him AD Mitchell. AD Mitchell, the most athletic wide receiver in this draft, falls all the way to 52 overall. We can talk about that more in a second here, Evan, but B for you on the Colts. What do you think of their draft?
All right, so Latu, 24 career sacks, 35 and a half tackles for loss, 5 forced fumbles in his career at UCLA. He slipped a little bit, I think. He was by far considered the most fundamental, technically sound pass rusher in the draft. Slipped a little bit, has a little concerning injury history, but obviously Chris Ballard thought that was a great value at number 15. He was the first defensive player drafted.
Yeah.
Adonai Mitchell, again, another little bit of a faller. Everybody seemed to think that entering day 2, AD Mitchell was going to be the number 33 overall pick. He falls due to perceived character concerns. He scored 11 touchdowns in 14 games this past season, 99th percentile athlete. Matt Goncalves out of Pittsburgh. He had an entertaining call with Chris Ballard. All the Colts like pump out uh, in draft videos,
Yeah.
like more so than any other team. And I think that they're super entertaining. Taylor Bortolini out of Wisconsin, I think the Colts view him as potentially Ryan Kelly's eventual successor at center.
Um, so on the AD Mitchell stuff, I mean, when Schefter came on here, and this was early in the process, maybe a month or 5 or 6 weeks ago or something, and he was adamant that the NFL liked AD Mitchell. AD Mitchell was going to go in the first round. AD Mitchell was going to go higher than people thought. Ever since he said that, all of a sudden you get character concerns, bad interview on AD Mitchell, not handling his type 1 diabetes correctly, which puts him, in a bad mood or whatever. And next thing you know, he dropped to 52 overall. If all that stuff turns out to be BS, this is going to be an awesome steal for an offense I'm so excited about. I mean, we have Anthony Richardson as our quarterback 5 right now in fantasy. He led all quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback last year. Now you get AD Mitchell, year 2 Josh Downs, a healthy Jonathan Taylor. Like, I'm excited about the Colts offense, assuming Anthony Richardson can stay healthy. They're going to play very fast, and Shane Steichen is the man. So, yeah, I'm just really excited.
Yeah, and the Colts offensive line performed better than I think anybody anticipated last year. They're bringing all those dudes back, and they added Goncalves in the 3rd round and Bortolini in the 4th round here. So you're feeling a lot better about their offensive line situation as well, and obviously their weapons have been upgraded.
Let's go to the Jacksonville Jaguars. They got a B- from Evan. I love that first trade that they made. The first trade where they go back from 17 to 23. They pick up a bunch of picks, and they get so much younger, right? And I don't know that Brian Thomas is going to end up being as good as Calvin Ridley. I do know Calvin Ridley is going to be 30 years old in December. Titans gave him $50 million guaranteed. Brian Thomas, they get to trade back, pick up more picks, and they get Thomas for just $14 million over the next 4 years. So that's kind of a gamble that I think is sharp, and I would want to make if I was the Jaguars. Evan, what do you think of Jacksonville draft?
Yeah, I mean, I think it started out really well. Did you see Tony Khan with the neck brace on TV? I met Tony Khan. I know Tony Khan. I met at I did a panel with him and Matthew Berry actually at the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference at MIT. It's like 10 years ago at this point, but he was a cool dude. But it was funny to see him because he got like body slammed or something during the AEW because he runs that wrestling.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I love. Yeah, I mean, I love that move down, and you still get Brian Thomas, and you pick up the number 167 selection, plus the Vikings' 3rd and 4th round picks. That's a great deal. Trent Baalke, not a big fan generally of Trent Baalke, but that was an awesome move. The rest of the draft, I think, was just kind of ho-hum. Mason Smith is like a boom-bust guy out of LSU, defensive tackle. Jerrion Jones has great measurables, Florida State cornerback, but really didn't make any plays at Florida State. Jordan Jefferson, LSU defensive tackle, I think projects as rotational help. But yeah, I mean, the Brian Thomas trade down and acquisition of future picks, that's why I gave him a B grade.
Yeah. Not the best news, I think, for Gabe Davis, or your boy Zay Jones. As you know, I think Evan Ingram, Christian Kirk are the volume guys, and then you're going to get Brian Thomas getting a lot of those athletic deep shots as well. So
they had very little explosiveness in their receiver core before this. It was going to be one of the worst wide receiver cores in the league. And this gives him a chance to make some big plays. Because Brian Thomas, 17 touchdowns last year in the SEC. Unbelievable measurables. That was awesome.
Chiefs got a B from Evan. It just seemed like things broke the right way for the Chiefs here. They're able to trade up with the Bills to get Xavier Worthy, obvious need at wide receiver and weaponry from Mahomes. And then, I'm going to butcher this name, but 63 overall, BYU tackle Kingsley Sumataya falls to them. I know a lot of people had a first-round grade on Kingsley, and he was certainly a need at tackle for them. So Evan ended up with a solid B on the Chiefs. What do you think of their draft?
Yeah, I think that they got like 4, maybe even 5, short or longer term contributors here. I think Xavier Worthy, I mean, I know he's 165 pounds. Some people didn't love his tape, but man, that explosiveness in this kind of an offense, that was really hard to pass. Such great return production as well. Sua Matia, I thought that he was going to. I knew that the Chiefs liked him, and I thought that he might be the 32nd overall pick. So for them to get him late in the second round, a potential starting left tackle at number 63 overall, that's a really, really nice situation, just falling into the Chiefs' laps. Travis Kelce just got a 2-year extension.
Yeah.
So Jared Wiley probably not going to see the field for a while, but he is a big seam-stretching tight end with potential down the road. Jaden Hicks, some people thought that he might be the first safety drafted, and he goes at 133 overall out of Washington State to Kansas City. Another, quote-unquote value pick, Hunter Nerzad. The Chiefs have had a lot of success drafting later round offensive linemen. Hunter Nerzad out of Penn State could be that next guy.
Everybody saw it was so obvious that Mahomes was throwing to dust balls. Guys were dropping passes. No one was open, et cetera, et cetera. They're relying on the defense. All of a sudden now you have Travis Kelce, Rashee Rice, pending suspension, Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy. I mean, that's nice now for Mahomes, and we have him up at quarterback 4 here in fantasy heading into the year.
What you like to see a lot of times with teams that have an obvious glaring deficiency at a certain position, self-scout, and then attack that position in draft and free agency. That's exactly what the Chiefs did. I mean, they're going to be good for a really long time.
Raiders, with a surprise pick, 13th overall, take Brock Bowers here. Of course, they took Michael Mayer, 35th overall in the 2023 draft. So tough, in my opinion, to get a high grade. If you're going to do stuff like that, you need Brock Bowers to be a massive outlier. And maybe he is, but typically, and there's a long history of this, is tight ends breaking out on second-year contracts. Tight ends not making year-one impact right away. I think Brock Bowers is going to be good right away. But after you took Michael Mayer at 35, I don't know. Evan, C- for you on the Raiders. What do you think of their draft?
Well, they emerged from the draft with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as their starting quarterbacks. So out the gate, their top 2 quarterbacks out the gate, you already know that the Raiders aren't going to be good again. That's like a virtual certainty because of their quarterback situation. I love Brock Bowers, but as you mentioned, it's hard for teams to play, 2 tight end sets more than 50% of the time. And so someone gets clipped here, probably Michael Mayer. I mean, if I was another team, if I was a team in need of a tight end, I would call the Raiders about Michael Mayer. Dylan Laub. I mean, the analytics nerds, they are obsessed with this guy. 6th rounder out of New Hampshire. We'll have discussions about him.
Yeah.
But he's a 6th round pick out of New Hampshire. Look, the comparison I have for him is Rex Burkhead. Love Rex. I have a Rex Burkhead jersey, okay, in my closet back here. But Dylan Laub is a 6th round pick out of Delaware. Or I'm sorry, New Hampshire. Yeah. So we'll see.
Look, it's not even analytics. It's just like for fantasy, we want guys who can catch passes. This guy caught 68 passes in 10 games. 68 passes in 10 games. Now, look, I think that it was a very good offseason for Zamir White. They let Josh Jacobs walk. They only added Alexander Madison on a close to minimum deal in free agency. They only use a round 6 pick at running back, and it's Dylan Laub, a pass catcher. And they had 8 picks in this draft. They had plenty of picks. They could have taken running back. They didn't. So I think they really like Zamir White a lot, and they're going to try to squeeze their way into the playoffs.
Zamir White is going to lead the NFL in carries in 2024. We did gloss over Jackson Powers Johnson. A lot of people thought would go in the first round. The Raiders get him at 44 overall. Apparently has kind of a quirky personality. He's got a little bit of an injury history, but he's an absolute beast. And so that was a nice little value pick in the second round for the Raiders.
All right, let's go to Los Angeles Chargers. Got a D+ from Evan, and I made a tweet about what moves that Jim Harbaugh has made this year. I was trying to make the point of what kind of offense they're going to run this year. Chargers Laundry Bro Twitter found it and have been going absolutely ham on me for the last 4 days. They were not happy with my Jim Harbaugh first moves tweet. One of the decisions that Jim Harbaugh made here is Joe Alt over Malik Neighbors, even though they have nothing at wide receiver. We'll get to Lad McConkey here in a second. But yeah, Evan, what do you think about all over neighbors and the Chargers draft?
Yeah, I was a little harsh on them with their grade. I mean, they have a clear vision. You have to give them. Sometimes, like there are teams. It's like, what is their plan? Like, what are they doing? They're just
Falcons
throwing crap against the wall. Yeah. At least the Chargers have a vision. That much is very, very clear. You know, I love Joe Alt, but he is a 6'8" finesse pass blocking left tackle who they're going to use at right tackle. You're changing his position right out of the gate. Lad McConkey, like you're gonna rely really heavily on this player that everybody loves his route running. Okay, I like the Emmanuel Sanders comparison, but he's like going to be your number one receiver. Junior Colson, Jim Harbaugh drafts a dude out of Michigan. I get it. He was one of the top off-ball linebackers in this draft. Cam Hart is a size speed specimen out of Notre Dame, cornerback. I mean, I like some of the players, but this just they have a vision. Their vision is not what my vision would be for how to build an NFL team, especially around Justin Herbert. Mm-hmm. I wanted them to go get some legit weapons. They could have taken Malik Neighbors, and Justin Herbert to Malik Neighbors would have been a sick battery.
Yeah. So we're working on pass rates and everything for the teams right now. We have the Chargers with one of the lowest pass rates in the entire NFL, and that is with Justin Herbert. But you absolutely have to. I mean, Jim Harbaugh came out in the press conference and says, I know the question is going to come up about weapons. We look at offensive linemen as weapons. And you could say, like, this is going to be great. They're going to be really run heavy, and they're going to play great defense. They have Khalil Mack, and they have Joey Bosa. Their running backs are Gus Edwards, who's freaking 29 years old, can't catch the football. J.K. Dobbins, who I actually think might be out of the NFL before it's said and done. And then they took this kid, Kimani Vidal, in the 6th round. Like, I don't know much about this Vidal kid, but he could certainly beat out Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins on a team that's going to try to run the ball on every play. So I agree with Evan. Like, it is a plan. I don't think it's the right plan, but it is a plan. And eventually, I think they can get there, but it's going to be ugly this year, man, especially for fantasy. It's just going to be ugly. All right.
Yeah.
Let's go to Dolphins. Dolphins got a B- from Evan. Took Chop Robinson with their first pick. I have some thoughts about the Jalen Wright pick, but I'll let you go first, Evan. What do you think of Dolphins draft here? You gave them a B-.
Yeah, it was okay. I mean, Chop Robinson, like, he has all the measurables in the world. He had 4 sacks last year. He was a rotational pass rusher at Penn State. I think that they're hoping that he will be like a better pro than he was in college. We'll see. Hey, you know what? That happens for a lot of Penn State players, actually. Patrick Paul, who they drafted, 6'8", 332, with 36 and a quarter inch arms. That is freakish. He started 44 games at Houston. I think they could put him at right tackle and then move Austin Jackson, who they gave an extension to last year, to left guard, with Teron Armstead coming back at left tackle. And I mean, they needed help on the offensive line. I think that might be their plan. We'll see about that. The Dolphins gave up a 3rd round pick next year to draft Jalen Wright in the middle of the 4th round.
Yeah.
That was a lot to surrender for a player that, look, he has a lot of explosiveness. But he, ball security and pass protection was not there. I think that he will be the short-term replacement, not necessarily this year, but within the next 2 years, for Raheem Mostert, who is 32 years old.
Yeah.
You had a tweet about Devon Achane.
Yeah.
That Devon Achane stretches the boundaries of reality.
I mean,
okay. He doesn't. Devon Achane is reality. Okay. The reality is that Devon Achane, he's not stretching the boundaries of reality. He is reality. The reality is that Devon Achane is a freaking baller.
You
Okay.
you can't go out here projecting guys to run for 8 yards per carry. It doesn't exist. That's not reality. So if people are going to sit here and say Devon Achane is going to be a second round pick on 12 touches a game, you're going to have to start projecting 8 yards per carry. And that's where he starts to stretch the bounds of reality for me. Now, I think Devon Achane is an awesome pick in fantasy. I'm real curious where his ADP settles because Mostert's back. He got the extension, and they trade up, as Evan said, for Jalen Wright. And by the way, Jalen Wright ran a 4.38. I mean, he's one of these Dolphins guys that can fly. So it's going to be hard for us to give Devon Achane more than 12 to 15 touches per game. Do I want that in the second round of fantasy? That's a question that we're going to have to work through.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any reality being stretched here. I just think that Devon Achane is reality and Devon Achane is him.
Yeah.
I really liked their 6th-round pick, Malik
Yes.
Washington. He's like 5'8" out of Virginia.
Yes.
He caught 110 balls last year. Was it Renner talk? Was it Renner? And Matt Harmon, I think, talked him up as well.
Yeah, I mean,
and they needed another receiving weapon.
And he could play the slot, and
Yes.
and he has to play the slot. And this guy torched the ACC. I mean, he was so productive in every game. I had heard that there was some unreported medical stuff on Malik Washington, which caused him to slip to the 6th round. I thought he was going to go in like the 3rd or 4th round, but ends up going in the 6th round to the Dolphins. I think it's an awesome landing spot for him. So he's someone I'm watching for sure.
Yep.
Patriots. So Patriots are on the clock at 3. They had a ton of offers. Giants, maybe the Vikings, maybe someone else. Not really sure. They stick at 3 overall. They take Drake May. Evan ends up with a C grade on the Patriots draft as a whole. Evan, what do you think of the decision to stick here for Drake May and any other Patriots draft thoughts?
Yeah, I'm not sure where I stand on Drake May becoming a success in the NFL, especially in New England, where the supporting cast just remains really concerning. And they try to take steps to repair it. I mean, their next 4 picks, wide receiver, tackle/guard, guard, wide receiver. So they definitely understand that the supporting cast for their new rookie quarterback is deficient, and they're hoping to get some hits on these dudes. Jalen Polk out of Washington averaged over 17 yards per catch in 3 years at Washington, 89th percentile RAS score. Caden Wallace was a 4-year starter at right tackle at Penn State. Layden Robinson was a 3-year starter at right guard at Texas A&M. Javon Baker went to was an Alabama recruit, and they only recruit like 4 and 5 stars. He winds up at UCF, 22 yards per catch as a senior. So I kind of get what they're doing here. But I remain skeptical that it's going to work.
Yep, agreed. Jets got a C+ from Evan. A lot of people thought they were taking Brock Bowers no matter what. If you listen to the Prop Show, which we didn't do great on, but if you listen to the Prop Show, one thing that we did get right was Jets not taking Brock Bowers. They take Alu Fashanu, which I think actually, given the health concerns around Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, was a sharp pick. And then they come back in the 3rd round and take Malachi Corley. I like that Corley pick. I don't think Alan Lazard can play, and we'll see on Big Mike off the injury. So I thought wide receiver was a need for the Jets. Evan gave them a C+. What do you think of Jets draft?
Yeah, it's a little bit all over the place. I mean, apparently Jets fans were pissed that they took another offensive tackle because Fashanu might not even start as a rookie. But as you mentioned, the injury concerns with Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses, they're both 33 years old. I think that there were some issues with Fashanu, though, too. I mean, he had like incredibly small hands, 8.5-inch hands. You do not see that for a massively built offensive tackle. That kind of stuff does matter. Corley drew a bunch of pre-draft comparisons to Deebo Samuel as an after-catch playmaker. I think that is a guy that will probably play in the slot until he makes a mistake, and Aaron Rodgers is like, get him out of here. We're bringing back Randall Cobb. Braylon Allen, 235 pounds, converted linebacker, did not run before the draft, and he was like a finesse runner at 235 pounds. I tend to struggle to love that kind of a player.
Yeah. I'm not sure why they needed 2 running backs. They took Braylon Allen in the 4th, and then they took Isaiah Davis in the 5th. I mean, it's whatever. The 4th and 5th round picks, it's not a big deal, but I would have just been like, I have Brees Hall and I have Izzy Abanikanda, and let's roll with it. But alas. Steelers used their first round pick predictably on offensive line. It was not Graham Barton, it was Troy Fatanu. Then they go offensive line again in round 2, clearly addressing a unit that has been a struggle for them for a long time. Evan, what do you think of Steelers draft?
I so the vision that, I'm going to compare and contrast here. The Chargers and the Steelers. They're both obviously going extreme, like run heavy, set the tone offensively, try to play good defense. The Steelers, it makes more sense, I think, for the Steelers because they don't have clarity at quarterback. Arthur Smith is their offensive coordinator. The Chargers have Justin Herbert, okay? I think you build around Justin Herbert. You have, in Pittsburgh, you have Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. They're probably both going to play, okay? And they have no long-term answer that we know of on the roster at quarterback right now. So very different situations. I love what the Steelers did, and I gave them a B+. Troy Fatanu, apparently they had him as the number 7 overall player on their board. They get him at number 20. Teams thought that he was a guard. I don't know exactly what position he's going to play in Pittsburgh. My guess would be right tackle. And they drafted, I think it was number 14 overall, Broderick Jones last year. And he was really good when he got in the lineup at right tackle. I think they're going to move him to left tackle. And they drafted Zach Frazier. I think they're going to plug and play at center. And I think they have most of their dudes coming back. Their offensive line was pretty good last year, actually. It was better than a lot of people anticipated, myself included. And now they get 2 young reinforcements in the first and the second round. Roman Wilson was a little baller slot receiver at Michigan. I think he complements George Pickens as a pure boundary receiver. That is a complementary duo. He ran 4.39 coming out of Michigan. And then they got a potential steal at number 98 overall, Peyton Wilson at an NC State linebacker. A lot of people thought that he was the best off-ball linebacker in the draft. He slips almost into the hundreds. It's because he has no ACLs, which I don't know how that happens, but that happened.
Yeah, and a lot of NFL teams just don't value off-ball linebacker at all.
Yeah. And the Steelers probably do because they're trying to build, a power offensive team, and they care about every position on defense. Then Mason McCormick, who had an unbelievable combine, they got him at number 119 overall to further replenish. Like, they are deep on the offensive line at this point, and they have a vision that I think makes sense for what they have at quarterback and in the coaching staff.
I thought sneaky winners from the draft were Najee Harris and Jalen Warren. I mean, they upgrade the offensive line massively. This offseason, they get the quarterback upgrade, even though it's not good. It's still an upgrade from Kenny Pickett. And then Arthur Smith is just such a run game hardo. Like, I think Warren and Najee are both going to have success running the football this year. Pretty good landing spot for Roman Wilson, as Evan mentioned. Deontay Johnson obviously gone here. Roman Wilson is a slot receiver. But yeah, I mean, we're talking about Van Jefferson and Calvin Austin and Quez Watkins. I mean, it's not going to be hard to earn targets if you're good, if you're Roman Wilson. Let's go to the last AFC team here, which is indeed the Tennessee Titans. A lot of trade rumors around the 7th spot. Even thought they could take wide receiver Rome Odunze if they wanted to. They do stick with J.C. Latham, 7th overall. Evan ended up with a D+ on the Titans. Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, Latham went a little early. I think that they would have preferred to have Joe Alt as like a true left tackle. And J.C. Latham, like, they're going to stick him in at left tackle. They drafted Peter Skoronski last year. He'll be at the left guard, and they spent $50 million on Lloyd Cushenberry. So, and they hired Bill Callahan, Brian Callahan's dad, one of the best offensive line coaches in NFL history. I think that their offensive line should take a step forward this year. It's just this number 38 overall pick, T'Vondre Sweat, they would really, really bother me that they went this early. I did not think he was going to go. I thought he was going to maybe slip to day 3 because he got a DUI 3 weeks before the draft. He ballooned over 400 pounds at times in college. that's just a big risk to take on at 38th overall for a team that, and really at a historically non-premium position. I mean, a massive 400-pound defensive tackle. Like, when was the last time that worked out? And then a bunch of day three guys. I don't know. I don't think it was a needle mover of a draft at all for Tennessee, and they needed a needle moving draft.
Yeah, Traylon Burks did stick here. I know you had speculated, and some other people had speculated that Trey Burks could be a trade candidate during the draft. He ends up sticking, at least for now.
Yeah, I wonder if they will end up giving him a shot at slot receiver between Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins. He played a lot of slot in college. He's been Traylon Burks has been a flop, but he's been a primary boundary receiver. But before the draft, when the coaches were talking, they did not mention Traylon Burks as being an option in the slot. Maybe they'll rethink that.
All right. We have said it all on all 32 teams. Draft 2024. We'll be back next episode to talk and rank rookie landing spots. We'll also have plenty more content and pods going forward about the fallout from this draft. If you are a dynasty bro or broette, you need Draft Kit Pro. If you are a best ball grinder, you need the best ball sub. If you want us to continue to produce free content like this, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and we will continue to do so. For Evan, for producer Luke, producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.